Well, welcome everyone. This is the Technology Threats and Best Practice for Your Office, what every small law firm lawyer should know. I'm Sam Choi. I'm a partner at King & Spalding. I'll be presenting as well as acting as moderator for this presentation. With me, we have a good group of panelists who are expert in this area. My first panelist is Christopher Chen. He is the founder and managing partner of Christopher J. Chen IP Law, where he practices all aspects of trademark, copyright, and patents as well as litigation work. And before he hung out his own shingle, he was with Big Law here in Atlanta for over 20 years. Our second panelist is Kevin Stoneham, who is the Chief Information Officer at King & Spalding, where he leads the firm's global technology efforts strategy, including cybersecurity efforts. And our final panelist is George Robles, who is a cybersecurity insurance expert with McGriff. So with the introductions out of the way, we're going to just ask Chris to take control of the deck here. If you can go to the next slide here, Chris, and maybe the next one. So I'm going to set the stage for this presentation. Obviously, cybersecurity is a very complicated and deep subject, and 1 hour is by no means sufficient time to cover all aspects of it. So what we're going to really focus on is really the third-party bad actors, cybersecurity criminals who are basically after valuable information, and what you as a small law firm attorney can do to protect yourself against that. We're hopeful that many of you have already taken actions. So the goal of this program is really to enhance your understanding and give you some practical information on where things stand and maybe things that you can do to enhance your current practices. So who are these cyber criminals? They range anywhere from the teenager in the basement just looking for a thrill and hacking systems to see if they can do it or not. But what we're seeing in most cases is a very sophisticated group of criminals who are very well funded and who are, in some cases, state sponsored. And what they're looking for is basically information that they can monetize. And typically, this is information that is personal information, financial information, things that they can use to either hold your systems hostage, or that they can sell on the dark market, or they can use directly to basically enrich themselves. So these efforts, on the more sophisticated level, involve malware, very sophisticated customized malware. But we also obviously see the low tech end, which sometimes is very successful, are these fake emails, where we got sometimes text messages you get that you need to respond to, or just things on normal email systems that you get that you might think is from a different party, but in fact it's something with fraudulent intent. So why should you be concerned? Law firms are really popular targets for cyber criminals, especially bigger law firms. And the reason for this is they really see law firms as one-stop shopping for them. Not only can they potentially access information about the law firm and its employees, but they can potentially access information about all of the law firm's clients. And these are things like, your clients' names, financial account information, social security, dates of birth, things of that nature that they can use to do bad. There's also a perception, or maybe a reality in some cases, that it will be easier to hack into the system of a law firm than some of the clients that the law firm represents. So that's the other reason that law firms tend to be very popular targets. Jorge will talk about this a little bit more during his presentation, but the average cost of a data breach, and obviously this will depend on the size of the data breach and the size of the organization, is over $4 million. And this has increased more than 15% in the last 3 years, according to an IBM report. Chris, can we move to the next slide? So the other reason that we as attorneys should be concerned about this is that the professional rules of conduct and common laws that are applicable to us require us to maintain the confidence of client information, as you all know already. And attorneys are required to take competent and reasonable measures to protect this information. And obviously, technology is a fast developing area, but it's not difficult to assume that this responsibility needs to track the development of technology. So while the law is still developing, if there is a data breach and there are potential claims against the law firm or the attorneys, I think the position you want to be is to say, I took reasonable and competent measures, but this still happened, as opposed to I did not take any measures or my measures were not commercially reasonable. So the other reason that law firms tend to be targets is they do have trust accounts set up for their clients. And sometimes, whether it's for a very short period of time or maybe for some weeks, it may hold significant funds for clients. Meaning if you had a closing, for example, if you had a large settlement that's sitting in your trust account, cyber criminals may want access to this, whether directly or by leading you to believe they may be a different party. There are reports of small law firms in the last few years who have just noticed funds missing from their trust accounts. And when the investigation is done, they realize that they improperly transferred the funds to a party that they thought they were transferring to was not in fact the party, or the cybersecurity criminals have basically gotten access to those funds directly. And the other reason that law firms should really be concerned about this is, regardless of what you've done or not done, if there is a data breach, it does negatively impact the reputation of the law firm, and to some extent, the trust that the clients or potential clients may have in the law firm. So there's another reason in terms of taking reasonable measures, because it will impact your bottom line. Chris, can you go to the next slide, please? So the threat to law firms is real and it's increasing. According to an ABA report, 25% of the law firms out there have suffered a data breach. And this is not actually attempted breaches, but an actual data breach where improper parties, cyber criminals, have gotten access to data or documents. 17% of the firms with 9 or fewer employees have been impacted. So again, this is not just a large firm, big law problem. It does go down to the smaller law firms. 35% of the firms with 10 or 49 employees have been breached, and 46% of the firms with 50 or 99 employees have been breached. Again, this is all according to a 2021 cybersecurity report. I suspect, I haven't seen a more recent report, these numbers are probably growing in the last few years as well. So if you can get the next slide, please. So if you look at the headlines impacting law firms and cybersecurity, there are some big headlines out there. I'm not going to mention the law firms, but basically in 2020, there was an entertainment law firm that was hit with a cybersecurity attack, and the demand was made for $42 million to release their systems. Another one, a global law firm, basically disclosed that more than 180,000 confidential files have been accessed. In 2023, a large Australian firm basically announced or disclosed that more than 4 terabytes of data had been accessed. And I'm not a technology expert, but this is a lot of data, 4 terabytes. In 2017, a large US-based firm fell victim to a phishing scheme in which they improperly or unknowingly released 1,500 W-2s to an unauthorized party. And obviously, we all know that W-2s contain a lot of confidential information, right? Names, social security numbers, those types of things. So this is really valuable data for cyber criminals. Just this week, I saw a headline that a large law firm based in the US had been hit with a class action. And the allegation is that this law firm not only suffered a data breach, but the allegation is that they waited more than 4 months to alert the impacted individual that their data had been compromised. And obviously the allegation is if they had known about it earlier, they would have taken more remedial protective action. So we'll see where that goes. And on more of the interesting headlines, in the last couple of years, I saw an article that 2 lawyers for Jared Kushner, former President Trump's son-in-law, 2 lawyers for Jared Kushner had fallen victim to basically pranksters using an email address that appeared to be from Jared Kushner. So they didn't necessarily use his exact email address, but they just used like a Gmail address that had Jared Kushner's email or name in the front of it or some part of it. And these attorneys actually thought it was from Jared Kushner and responded to these emails. So again, it doesn't take a whole lot of sophistication sometimes for us to fall victim to these schemes if we're not aware. All right, with that, I will turn it over to Chris to talk about measures that law firms can take. And again, I think Chris brings a real unique perspective because he's been in the big law environment as well now in a smaller law firm environment. So Chris, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Just again, I'm Christopher J. Chan. I founded my own practice and law firm just over a year ago, and I primarily practice in intellectual property. I'm a full service IP lawyer. I think it's important to understand what types of information that every law firm is managing or otherwise looking after with respect to their clients. So for my clients, primarily intellectual property files, and that includes patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets sometimes, and a lot of strategic counseling, communications, and background materials supporting my clients, patent, trademark, copyright, and trade secret files. A lot of confidential information extends to clients' payment information, check numbers, bank account numbers, credit card numbers, personally identifiable information that can be, anything, any type of information that can lead back or can readily identify, the individual or even the company. This information can also include emails, phone numbers, addresses. So this is the essential type of information that at least my law firm handles, every day. We're collecting it, we're exchanging emails, we're exchanging phone calls, we're exchanging texts sometimes to get this information from clients. So it's important to, I think, take an inventory with respect to your own law firm's collection of information and how you are storing that and also protecting it. So our cybersecurity approach, because I'm a small firm, I don't have a separate IT department anymore or a cybersecurity professional helping me. It's really on me as the sole member of my practice to protect and implement my clients' data and all other forms of cybersecurity with respect to my firm. First of all, I have hired a summer intern, a 3L from Emory this past year to help me. So I do have practical experience in cybersecurity with respect to my firm and my, I guess, employees. So I think that's important for every firm to have a written policy and procedure with respect to cybersecurity. I think after today's presentation, you'll have at least the basics to draft up a policy and procedure if your firm doesn't already have one. I've already mentioned inventorying all the confidential information that your firm may have, and every firm is different. Every firm's practice is different. So your firm may be collecting other types of information I haven't described, but I think it's important with respect to your clients' files, every single communication, every single pleading, every single document that you generate, essentially, could potentially have confidential information in it, even if you are publicly filing it. Ultimately, as you're drafting it, you wouldn't want that draft to somehow slip out before it's filed. Your firm's strategy, the lawyer's strategy, your client's strategy is inherently within that document before it's filed and or published. So you wouldn't want that to slip out in some form of data breach or sending it to the wrong recipient. With respect to all your employees, all your outside contractors, even your vendors that are helping the firm, I believe it's important to vet them as far as their backgrounds, as far as their own procedures, and what equipment they are using to handle your client's information when you exchange it or otherwise disclose it or otherwise work with these persons and companies. It's going to be very important that each one of them has their own procedure, their own policy, their own measure of cybersecurity and protection on their own equipment. And you'll want to be very mindful as to which information is going to each one of these persons or entities and how they are safeguarding your client's information, because ultimately a breach at their end can come back and hurt you, and you'll be responsible for your clients' confidences and secrets and information if a breach happens at the employee, contractor, or vendor level with respect to your own client's information. Next off, you want to educate and discuss active threats. So I think educating yourself themselves as far as what threats are out there and understanding the nature of those threats is very important to understanding how to mitigate those threats. And I'll discuss some of those threats with respect to my own firm in the next few slides. With respect to a potential data breach, I think it's important to have an action plan. A quick series of steps that you can take if you suddenly realize that something is funny or something is wrong, or you suddenly realize your client's files or a document that you sent out is suddenly out there in the public or on social media, or otherwise your client alerts you, a horrifying revelation potentially, that you are the source of a data breach. So it's important to have an action plan in place so you aren't scrambling around at the last minute trying to figure out how to remedy a data breach. And lastly, but not least, insurance coverage. You'll want to have some form of cybersecurity or cyber breach insurance coverage for your own law firm. So the active threats, this is with respect to my firm, but it's probably very applicable to others. I think you'll want to inventory your firm's computers, servers, phones, tablets, anything that has access to a network or is communicating with others. You'll want to understand how those devices are protected. Are they password protected? Are they dual password protected? Are they exposed out on the internet? Are they just communicating with clients one-on-one by emails? How are these devices connected up? And take an active inventory as to what the potential threats and what access others outside of your firm may have with respect to these devices and your internal client files. The next item is data collection. The active threats here, and I see this every day. I'm very active on social media, and every day I get invites from unknown persons or profiles, particularly on LinkedIn and Facebook. Their profiles may be a very attractive person. On their profile picture, they may have a very compelling resume and might be somebody that I would ordinarily want to connect with, but on a deeper dive into their profile, I'll see that they don't have any connections, they don't have any friends, or their connections and friends are very dispersed. It's not anybody that my friends or connections or many of them have connected with, and therefore I conclude very quickly that these persons are usually fake profiles. And usually the purpose of these fake profiles is to either gain access to your contacts on LinkedIn and Facebook if you haven't locked them down and made them private, or otherwise trying to create communications with you to gain your confidence and to portray themselves as a potential client. And then they can likely send you emails and know how you respond and figure out your protocols with respect to communications. I think it's very important that you teach your employees, those that are LinkedIn and on Facebook and other social media connections, not to just friend and to connect with anybody, but to be very careful, because these are usually very easy routes into your law firm's communications and connections, and every employee, every contractor that you communicate with is potentially a liability or a weakness when it comes to data collection and phishing attempts. On communications, the active threats, obviously, we talked about texts and messages and phone calls. People on the outside, bad actors can be pretending that they are somebody else, or pretending that they're you. And once they have enough information, they can drop client names, they can drop the right email addresses, they can drop the right phone numbers, and figure out the right ways into your law firm's communication system, simply through an email or a text to you. It may look very real, it may look very legitimate, but after seeing a lot of fake ones, I know the fakes are getting better, and potentially, I think every law firm is potentially a target for fake texts, fake messages, and fake phone calls. Eventually your firm is going to fall for one, and hopefully you'll have other measures in place to catch and to prevent a data breach if they get by the first level of security, which is the person reading the text or message, or receiving the phone call or the email. The one thing that I'm very concerned about are file downloads and ransomware, and these attacks have become more prevalent throughout our industry, and with much smaller clients I've been hearing, or much smaller companies I've been hearing, the ransomware demands might be $5,000, $10,000, a piece, but that can be a lot of money for a small firm to pay up to have access to their files, once somebody in their law firm clicks on a download or clicks on a ransomware email that quickly uploads files to their system and locks them down for a ransom amount. Now, I think an emerging threat that we need to be mindful of are deep fakes, and with the rise of artificial intelligence and other technologies, a deep fake profile or person can be created or artificially created, and could sound like and look like me, perhaps, and sound like and really use my voice. Somebody could be recording today's presentation, and just with a few snippets of my voice can recreate my voice, and could recreate me talking to my employees or somebody at the other end, and be a very convincing deep fake, asking for money, or asking for passwords, or asking for other information at the other end to somebody that doesn't realize it's a deep fake. So I think we have these threats to come with respect to deep fakes, and I'm waiting to hear about the first deep fake attacks on law firms and companies. But just be aware that we may need to go to some form of secondary authentication or dual authentication whenever we connect on Zoom, just to make sure that we know that it's Christopher J. Chan at the other end speaking, and I give you a password or authenticated ID to make sure that that it's definitely me. And then the last active threat is with respect to data security, your payment and client information. You want to make sure that login access and signatory authority is very limited, and that the logins are definitely password protected, if not dual authenticated. You want to control who has those credentials to your trust accounts and operating accounts for the law firm, and make sure that those persons that do have access have good security with respect to their passwords. Mitigation on all these items. I think I've gone over a few of these, but some to note. You'll want to have monthly changes to your passwords on all systems and devices. I think that's an important practice for your firm to implement. I change mine every month, and it changes ever so slightly, so I don't ever forget it. But it changes enough that a bad actor, if they get my old password, probably can't guess the next iteration of the password. You want to consider installing a kill switch on your phone or laptops to make sure that if your laptop or phone is compromised or otherwise lost, that you can remotely deactivate it or otherwise wipe it clean. That's probably a good practice to have for everybody's phone and laptop. With respect to data collection, I've kind of been over that, and I'm going to ask everyone to go on mute. I'm hearing a little bit of background. Thank you. On data collection, I think the first rule here is to be suspicious of everybody that connects with you. You want to make sure the person that's connecting with you, you've either met them in person, and that's my safeguard. I don't connect with people that I haven't met with in person, and then I double check to see if they have a number of connections, mutual connections with me already, and then I am, that's my kind of secondary control that I implement before I connect with you on Facebook or LinkedIn, and that helps me, minimize or mitigate the risk of phishing by people that I don't know phishing around on my Facebook and LinkedIn profiles. I will admit that I did click on a fake profile just this weekend, and it was after a conference that I attended, and the person profile looked very familiar to somebody that I had recently met, and as soon as I clicked on it, literally I got a response back, and it was somebody thanking me and wishing me happy Thanksgiving. And that was a immediate clue that maybe this person isn't who I thought it was, and I immediately unfriended them, blocked them, and took a deeper look at their profile. And yes, it was a fake profile. I had been fooled, and fortunately, I was able to block them very quickly. But had it not been for that message back, trying to create a conversation with me, and it was a very odd message back to me, I probably would not have caught them. But I do go through the profiles that I do click on immediately thereafter, and I do try to call out any suspicious activity there. On communications via phone calls and emails, make sure that you have your spam filters on, make sure that you have that you're actively blocking phone numbers that look suspicious. And I go through and I don't answer every phone call. I routinely don't answer phone calls from suspicious numbers, and when there is a number that could be from somebody I know, I do an online search. I actively look at phone numbers that are calling me, and if they do show up on the internet or otherwise have a message, a voicemail to me that is spam, I will block their numbers so they can't contact me, and it filters out future attempts at trying to contact me. With respect to data security, I think it's important to again make sure that you have good login procedures, passwords, do authentication. You want to update your computer operating systems and software, including the latest versions of apps. And this will help with your data security and protecting your payment and client information, and making sure that the latest computer and phone software upgrades are installed on your phone. And this includes virus and malware, virus filters and malware. I know Apple has certain measures built into their operating system, and I know that if you do subscribe to virus and malware protection programs, that the latest versions usually capture the latest threats out there. I'll move on from mitigation, and I'll turn it over to Kevin, who is the Chief Information Officer over at King & Spalding. Kevin?
Thank you, Chris, and we can move to the next slide. It's a pleasure to be with everybody today. Thank you. I'm Kevin Stoneham, Chief Information Officer at King & Spalding, as introduced, and I've had the pleasure of spending my career in larger firms, but I've also, throughout my career, had opportunities to consult and advise and assist smaller practitioners, including partners who are retiring from our firm and moving into a sole practitioner situation, friends and other colleagues. So really want to spend a few minutes just sharing some of my thoughts on how a very small practice might undertake some of these things. And the first thing I'd like to do is sort of dispel a myth that good security perhaps is only the domain of a very large organization with a lot of money to invest and a lot of people to dedicate to the area. We're seeing with the availability of cloud business platforms, things from Microsoft and Google and even legal specific cloud providers like Clio, that you have good security built into those systems and they are accessible at a very moderate monthly fee, even to the smallest law firms. The second point, and Chris touched on this, is knowing where your data is that you have an obligation to protect and having an inventory. I think of this as sort of like the unfavorable process of moving from one house to another. Eventually, you've got to go into the basement and kind of clean up and organize and discard the old things that you no longer need to keep. A process like this with the data that you have developed over the course of your practice over time is a very healthy thing to do, and you simply can't put good protections on information that you've forgotten that you have. The next thing I'd like to share is just no technology system is completely secure, but you can avoid being an easy target. I remember growing up, my uncle shared with me the idea that a padlock keeps an honest person honest, but it makes it a little bit more difficult to go past the padlock as opposed to the neighbor who's left the door unlocked. That's true in cybersecurity, and taking some basic measures that are available to all of us can make you a much more difficult target for an adversary, and they'll move on to others in many cases. Be very concerned about any system that you have that is protected only with a user ID and password. The machines that can generate and just what they do, they call a brute force attack, where it tries your email address as the login ID, which is the case for many of our systems these days, and it just tries password after password. Any system that you have that's the way to log in, and if it's holding sensitive information like your financials or confidential information that you have an obligation to protect for your firm and for your clients, those are things that really need your attention. And then adversaries are becoming more sophisticated. A couple of things here. It used to be years ago, we could use the detection of poor writing, exotic sort of claims and offers in emails, and it was pretty clear that a malicious message or an untrusted message would stand out. That's no longer the case, and adversaries are, if they're targeting you in particular, they're looking at what you have on social media. Those things that pop up that look like a fun game of, tell us about your first car, probably by somebody on social media that you don't even know. If you enter it like I would for an old Datsun pickup that my father handed down to me, then I've probably just given away an answer to one of my security questions in some system. So these adversaries they're targeting and they're using an array of sophisticated methods to appear trusted and to gain information that they can use to target you. So then on the next slide, just a few specific recommendations related to these. Gather that inventory of where your firm and client information resides. And sorry, Chris, if you could just move us to the next slide. Thank you, sir. Gather that information and revisit that from time to time to make sure that those repositories and systems are the ones that you're thinking about securing. Enable multi-factor authentication. It takes a few minutes. When you log in, for example, to your bank, getting that code is one extra step. But the significance of that security for multi-factor authentication is so significantly stronger than just a simple username and password that it really is worth taking the effort for all your highly sensitive accounts. Look at the cloud platforms available to you. I know many of my friends who are sole practitioners have had servers that sort of sit in the closet, and they've accumulated a lot of data over the years. Those servers need to be maintained by the firm or some IT consultant that the firm hires. And the rate at which we need to patch those old systems is just increasing constantly because of the kind of technology vulnerabilities. If you move to cloud systems, then that is happening on your behalf by the cloud provider. And they're looking at the threats that are emerging day by day and constantly adjusting their cloud platforms to address the emerging threats without you having to take action or without you having to have the IT consultant come by. I really recommend that that you look at that and migrate the data from those old servers. Just go ahead and get rid of them if you can. Be suspicious of the incoming messages from with unexpected and urgent requests. One of the most effective means that you can use to address the kind of threats that Chris was talking about in terms of impersonation or unwanted demands from from somebody who's trying to trick those involved in a case, is to simply use another means of getting back in touch with your known party, your client or the opposing party or what have you. Use their telephone number if the message came in via email. Text them if you have that channel open. But use another method saying, hey, did you send this demand? Because this is a little bit unexpected. And then I think I've already covered the point of social media, so I'll now hand it over. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for allowing me to join this panel discussion and listen in. I'll kind of touch on the insurance market as it relates to cyber insurance and cybersecurity insurance. Here, I think it's relevant just given the audience at the bottom right there. This is some recent stats that came out from a cybersecurity forensics firm, Sophos. So collating all of their data that they've taken up from events that they've responded to, specifically ransomware and data breaches. But you can see there that the professional category that I think Chris just kind of highlighted is the second largest kind of distribution outside of other there at the bottom right. So obviously I think Sam kind of mentioned this earlier, but the professional sector specifically is targeted because of the amount of data that they hold on some large clients, whether that be a large law firm or a small law firm, medium-sized law firm, et cetera. I can remember back in 2020, which is when really the ransomware epidemic started because of the immediate remote workforce that we all kind of turned to because of the pandemic. The first kind of large ransomware event that I was a part of was with a small, medium-sized law firm that ended up paying almost $2 million in just the extortion payment alone. And that's, I think Chris kind of touched on this earlier, but the extortion payment is just the tip of the iceberg, right? You still have forensic costs that come on top of that, any sort of notification to impacted individuals, companies, any sort of contractual liabilities that you have on top of that, et cetera. So if you see up there to the top right of the screen, even a $20,000 extortion payment could turn into $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 claim when all is said and done. And you sort of see there, as you migrate over to the right, there's a big distribution of claims or ransomware extortion payments that are exceeding $1 million and sometimes even $5 million for the events that Sophos has responded to in 2023 versus 2022. You guys may have seen some publications that stated ransomware is actually down, and I would say that was probably true in 2022 as compared to 2021. A lot of different theories out there, a lot of them pointing to the threat actors who, the big business type threat actors that mostly come out of Russia or Eastern Europe, were focused on themselves, attacking themselves through the Russia-Ukraine, conflict war. But since then, since really the start of 2023, we've seen ransomware actually exceed the highest levels of 2020, 2021, and 2022. So those events are now back, and the market is certainly feeling it, especially on the small to medium-sized businesses, which is where a lot of this activity, the claims activity in our world is focused at this point. So yeah, Chris, if you can just kind of go to the next slide. And for those in the meeting who have purchased cyber insurance and in the past or still kind of purchase it, this distribution model of the pricing index here probably looks very familiar. You sort of see in 2020, really at the end of 2020, the pricing for these premiums really is eye-watering year over year, with averages in December of 21 right around 125%. So that's a significant cost increase year over year, and really that period of time of 2020 to 2022 was really difficult for our market. It was very challenging, as your representative in the marketplace to, deliver these types of results, even if, you were implementing best security controls and really good security posture. The threat activity and the losses being paid were such that most carriers weren't making any money. So they had to increase premiums, unfortunately, and pass along those costs to clients. But the pricing, I think the risk transfer to do so was still worth it for most of our clients. Even paying double what they were paying, it's still low single-digit percentages of the overall kind of costs that were that you would experience had you had a ransomware event. So but as you can see, as we're getting into 2023, those prices have actually either stabilized or come down. So if you haven't already renewed this year, there should be some good news on the horizon, especially if you can demonstrate good controls. And I would say if you still have cyber insurance through sort of the very difficult, challenging market that we just went through, you should be, in that camp. If not, I know a really good representative for you in the marketplace for that. So just a shameless little plug there. But anyways, I just for those who in the room who have purchased cyber insurance, there should be some good news for you in store later on this year. And then if we go to the next slide there, really our market's really growing, and carriers are still sort of pegging this product as their growth engine going into the next 10 to 15 years, especially with the expansion of companies and firms such as yourselves looking to purchase the coverage and realizing that, it's not the size of a company or the type of information that you hold. Everyone is sort of at risk for a cyber event. These threat actors are not, they do not discriminate when it comes to the type of company that they go after. If they can find a hole in your system and somehow monetize that, usually through ransomware, they'll do it. Like I said earlier, it was a small, medium-sized law firm that paid, a small 7-figure amount just to get these threat actors to go away and not release their client data. So you're seeing those impacts of supply and demand economics impact the overall pricing. So that is a reason some of the premiums are going down. You're creating more competition, so you are able to pin carriers against each other to lower the premium amounts. But overall, the market is growing and looking to surpass actually the D&O market, directors and officers insurance, and peg to sort of exceed 50 billion in gross written premium in just over 6.5 years by 2030. So really, really good news, hopefully in store for those in the room, and hopefully a way to supplement your risk transfer and hopefully not have to deal with these threat actors on your own dime. And two, I think something that often goes unnoticed is that a lot of these carriers have, to Kevin's point about security, external resources that you can leverage as part of the overall premium. They're, these insurtechs, insurance, technology type companies that have scanning tools that you can leverage for free as part of your overall premium spend. They alert you if they know of, or if they see something, on the network that looks kind of fishy or an open port, et cetera. So, it's really a good combination of, an insurance policy as well as some additional, tooling that you can leverage to make the firm more secure. So with that, I'm all wrapped up.
Great. Thanks, George and everyone else. And before we open it up to some questions from our attendees, I have some follow-ups. So we talked about the potential cost to respond to a cybersecurity incident, including ransomware, forensics, remediation. So George, what does a cybersecurity typically cover and exclude in the event of these types of events?
Sorry, one second. Yeah, so exactly what you just pegged, right? So it's going to cover, first of all, the cyber extortion amount, right? It's going to also cover, someone to make that payment on your behalf, right? So I'm sure people on this call don't have a Bitcoin wallet that, first of all, they probably want to use to make that payment, or have Bitcoin, right? So the cost to engage in those types of vendors. It'll also provide costs to remediate if you need to rebuild any systems, any forensic work to make sure that the threat actors are actually out of your system, as well as notification costs to impacted individuals, any sort of response to a suit or to any sort of settlement, et cetera. Those are all going to be costs, as well as any sort of income loss, business interruption costs, extra expenses. So if you need to set up an additional network to keep your business running while your impacted network is down, those are the types of costs that would be covered. Something that is definitely in the headline right now about exclusion, things aren't covered. War, war is never an insurable peril in any sort of insurance product unless you're buying a specific war policy. So be very mindful of the war exclusion and making sure that there's not some restrictive language around state-sponsored actors or leaving the carrier to conclude reasonably that it could be a state-sponsored actor. Those types of language is something that you definitely want to pull out of the policy language, and there are carriers who will do that. And then making sure that what we call a retroactive date, right? So making sure that retroactive date exclusion, making sure that that's either not applicable or that the retroactive date is removed. So and of course any sort of knowingly or someone in the senior management team deploying ransomware on your system on purpose, right? So any sort of act that is purposeful from someone in a senior management role. Those are the types of exclusions that we see as well.
Okay, thanks, George. Very helpful. Kevin, as CIO, you monitor attempted unsuccessful attacks on a just sort of average general daily basis. How frequently do these attacks or attempted attacks happen?
Yeah, Sam, it's almost constant. Just a couple of statistics. For every good and legitimate email that we get here at King and Spalding, we have another one or two for that our firewalls are rejecting. Now, some of those are just pure spam and maybe not be malicious cyber attempts, but some of those are things from known malicious actors or that have known malicious links or attachments embedded in them. So that's one point. And then on our attempted logins, when we look at the different systems, there are attempts that fail our security defenses on a daily basis for most accounts, coming from all corners of the world. So it is really a constant threat and a constant attempt. As we've touched on, there are some of these parts of the world that have turned cyber attacks into a full business. They have call centers, they have customer support agents, and the way they go to do business is they simply they send out so much attempted phishing messages and the like, that they're just looking for anybody to respond to that. So they may not be, in those cases, they may not be targeting you or your firm directly. But if somebody clicks and they have the situation where that takes hold, then that business organization, as malicious as it is, will kick in.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So, Chris, for a small law firm, and hopefully this never happens, aside from being contacted by law enforcement or one of your clients saying you are the source of a potential data breach, are there any red flags that law firms can look for to see if their systems have been compromised? Because as I understand it, some malware, once installed, can just be there in the background without anyone particularly being aware of it.
Right. Yeah, it's very difficult to know that you've been breached, but I would always be very mindful and understand how your own computer, your phone, and your system works on a routine basis. And hopefully you aren't compromised at this moment, but just understand that when you are compromised or when there is a uploaded virus or malware, your system may start acting a little bit funny. Your phone may slow down, or your laptop may move a little slower, or you may notice that there's a lot of network traffic, even though you're the only one uploading or downloading files in a single day. You'll want to just be mindful of what your daily metrics are and understand if those are exceeded. And you also want to really pay attention to the apps that you have on your phone, or the applications that you have downloaded on your laptops, or even your browser settings. Some malicious software, malware, viruses can make changes to browser programs and can make changes and upload certain files and apps to your phone and laptops. So you want to be, again, very mindful of what's there already. And frequently, I would say, once a month I do it. I go in and look at what's on my phone. I clear out apps that I haven't used in a while, and sometimes I forget that I've downloaded a certain app, and I'll clean that off as well. But if you notice strange apps or strange settings that that you haven't uploaded or otherwise made, then you want to look a little bit deeper into whether your system has been compromised.
Thanks, Chris. So, Kevin, back to you. So law firm systems tend to be somewhat similar, but obviously there's a lot of variation in that space. So how should generally a small law firm go about assessing the risk that's applicable to their setup, their systems?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. One of the things I do recommend is, if you're already working with as a small solo practitioner, a smaller firm, if you work with a part-time IT consultant, talk to them about whether they can help you assess the security profile and posture of your systems and your setup overall. An additional tool that you can use is the very cyber insurance qualifications that were covered earlier. That in itself is a form of an assessment that you'll go through. You'll look at the systems and whether you have multi-factor authentication, how they're protected, whether your virus protections and the like are staying up to date. And then finally, one of the resources that I wanted to mention is the NIST, N-I-S-T, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. If you just Google NIST small business, there's a wealth of resources available from the organization that can help you do a small business focused assessment of your security practices. And there's even some free cybersecurity awareness training available there on their site. Very, very focused and a rich set of information and guidance there.
Right. Kevin, and I could think it's a good leeway for a question for George. So what does the cybersecurity insurance underwriting process look like? And do you get any premium discounts if the law firm has taken reasonable security measures versus not having taken any measures or substandard measures?
Yeah, so the application process, insurance requirements has dramatically changed over the last 2 or 3 years. So usually it requires a ransomware application, which is really just a catchy way of saying security posture questionnaire. But it generally requires probably a 3 or 4 page application digging into the controls in place. Some of these insurtechs that I mentioned recently will do an external scan as part of the underwriting process, and base their questions off of that. But I would generally say, I think Kevin hit on this earlier, but multi-factor authentication, that's kind of a table stakes control now. You need to have that, I would say, for 98% of the carriers out there in order to qualify for coverage. I know it's a nuisance and it can be a little annoying, but it really does, eliminate probably 95% of the threat activity out there just by implementing, that one control, and the carrier's claims data reflects that as well. And that's why they really push for that. But generally speaking, a short application and maybe answering some questions based off of an external scan.
Okay, great, thanks, George. And with the few minutes left, I'd like to open up for questions. And I see we did get an earlier question through the chat function here. And the question, and maybe I'll let Chris take this one, is whether generally Apple products or Microsoft products tend to be safer than the other, because I think there are some myths out there that one may be safer. Chris, what's your take on that?
Yeah, full disclosure, I am an Apple fan and product user. I've been using Apple since I was a teen. I believe Apple may have a slight edge, but that edge is probably greatly diminished over the years. But I still think they have a slight edge in the being a little bit more security conscious. But I'll actually let the expert in the room, maybe Kevin, address this.
Yeah, Chris, I would just add that I would suggest that it's more about how you, I would call it, manage the device. How do you keep it up to date on the software updates? As you mentioned earlier, deleting unneeded stray applications that may themselves become compromised down the road. I think it's that probably is even more important than the platform that you select. But I do agree, Apple has some advantages on that.
Great, thank you. And I know, at least Kevin, our firm, attorneys have both products, right? A lot of us use Apple's and Microsoft. So I think it's one of those environments where we can't go exclusive one direction or the other. So we have a few more minutes left. Kim, if you want to open it up to see if anyone else has any questions, either through the chat or if they want to speak up. Chris? Oh, you're muted, Chris.
Yeah, I have a news flash. It was in the newspaper this morning in the AJC, and I was horrified to find that I was potentially leaking information. But Venmo, I know a lot of us use Venmo. There are privacy settings that you can implement to, if you are a Venmo user. Venmo is a payment platform where you can make person-to-person payments through credit cards and bank accounts. And that information, the transaction information, if you don't choose the privacy setting, are public information out there on the Venmo platform. So I went on and looked at mine, and the last 6 months of my Venmo transactions were public. So I went in at 5 a.m. this morning and took an hour locking everything down. But I went on and looked at a few friends' profiles, and I could see all the transactions they were making and who they were friends with. And I was a little bit horrified that mine had been open for the last 6 or 7 months. So if you are a Venmo user, lock down your Venmo account, make all your transactions private. You can do it with a one-click in the settings, and then you can also click off your contact information so that it's not public. Tip of the day.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, we are almost out of time, but one last question. George, I know every case is individual and circumstances specific, but in terms of a ballpark, what can a solo practitioner, if they want to get cybersecurity policy, what can they expect in terms of range of premiums, ballpark?
Yeah, I think probably from I want to say maybe $1,000 to $2,000 to $3,000, just depending upon the controls in place. You may be able to get it less, maybe in the few hundreds. But it really just depends on the controls in place to be able to give you a better number.
Okay. Thanks, George. Well, with that, I think we are exactly at time. So I'd like to thank each of our panelists for their participation. I also like to thank all the participants, and hopefully you had some good takeaways from this webinar. So thanks, everyone. Hope the rest of your day is good. Bye now.
Thank you so much to our speakers. This was a phenomenal presentation. I'm sorry I was not able to greet you at the beginning. I am Nkoyo Effiong-Lewis, Director of Law Practice Management Program here at the State Bar. This was a fantastic program that was orchestrated, organized by Sam Choi, who is a member of our advisory committee. And so just very much thank you all for putting in the time and delivering such incredible information. Cybersecurity remains one of the biggest threats to law firms. Despite us knowing the risk, we as lawyers often are not taking the steps. And so I hope that you are able to get some actionable tips and things that you could take forward to improve your cybersecurity and your knowledge of the threats that are out there. Just want to do a quick plug about the program. We are here to support you. The Law Practice Management Program is designed to help attorneys start, scale, or shut down their law practice with less stress. We offer consultations, resources, and we have a one-day summit happening September 22nd that is focused on profitability. I don't know about you all, but when I was practicing and running my own firm, I was a better attorney, a happier attorney when my firm was profitable. And so our goal is to help you in one day figure out what you need to do to make sure that your firm is profitable and that you are marketing and positioning your services appropriately so you can have more time to do anything besides the practice of law. So we hope that you will join us September 22nd here at the Bar Center. Be on the lookout for information, and the registration for that will be opening soon. And with that, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Go make it a great day.